Hey guys, it's Rachel. On my channel, I talk about reading and writing, and we are overdue for a reading wrap up. I haven't done one in a minute, so I'm going to talk about some of the books that I've read recently. In the past, when I make these, I usually kind of wrap up the books that I read in like chronological order. I don't know. That lately hasn't been the vibe for me. I really like how, like for example, Jordaline Reads. I'm sure she's not the only one, but she will wrap up her book starting from her least favorite to like her favorite for the out of the set. I think I'm gonna do that today. I don't know, that just sounds right. Before I get hardcore into these books though, I do want to say one of the books I read is Naked Soul by B.R. Alexander, and I want to make this separate because I helped edit this book, so I have like a bias towards it. So Alexander's style is it's not like mine in a lot of ways, but I think one thing we have in common where it's like it's not too literary and it's not too minimalist. It's kind of a nice in between. And so that book just came out recently. I definitely recommend checking it out if that kind of not quite literary, not quite minimalist, if that description kind of piques your interest, maybe check it out. Basically, it's like a set of personal poems. I don't know, he's basically just going through all of like these kind of big moments and small moments of life. So, and there's a big range of tones that he's able to capture pretty well. So like we've got serious stuff, we've got humorous stuff. It's just, I don't know, I think it's really, really solid. And I think that, because I also helped him edit his first collection, I think he's growing a lot as a poet. I made way fewer recommendations this time. So yeah, take a look at that if you want to support some indie poetry. So now on to everything else. So I am going to start with a Jane Eyre retelling. I love Jane Eyre. That's, if I was like forced to say one favorite classic, it would probably be that one. And so this retelling was Strange Unearthly Things by Kelly Cree. I don't know how to say her name. And this woman, she wrote Nevermore, and I loved Nevermore. I did not love the sequels at all. So that's where I'm at with her. But in Strange Unearthly Things, in this Jane Eyre retelling, your main character is, like in the original Jane Eyre, an orphan, but this girl is a psychic. Her drawings have a psychic quality to them. And so Mr. Elias Thornfield, so our Edward Rochester equivalent, he has some major paranormal problem with his house. And so he summoned a team of psychics to basically show up and see what they can do about it. So I thought that this was going to be really fun because I assumed that since it's a Jane Eyre retelling, it would have the same feelings that Jane Eyre gave me while having a more fast-paced, like paranormal related plot. And so I was hoping that there would be a balance between, yes, we have a lot of action happening, but we still have that kind of yearning that is a trademark of Jane and Rochester's relationship, and secrets and mystery and things like that. However, I don't know, man, this did not hit. I didn't get the feeling of Jane Eyre, first of all. That's kind of problem number one. I didn't get the yearning. And I think a big part of the problem is, while I was totally okay and open to this retelling have a more fast-paced plot, it was too fast. As a result, you don't get that brooding atmosphere that you get in Jane Eyre and in other gothic horror and other gothic novels. It just felt like a major lack of character development in a lot of ways. Like, Jane has this whole history that we only get very vague allusions to, and I felt like it could have been drawn out a bit more. And like Elias Thornfield, again, I feel like everything we know just kind of scratches the surface of their lifetimes, and I don't know. Another issue that I had was, and I don't want to spoil how she does this, but it's done in a different way. So Jane Eyre is an age gap romance, and I don't mind that in fiction. But I don't know. The way that age gap romances, when I'm reading about them anyway, I feel like it only really works when your main character feels like they are at the maturity level of their love interest. I did not get that from this. So, like, Jane is just... she talks like she's Gen Z, which I mean, I get that. This is supposed to be a YA retelling, right? I get that that's why it was like that, that she wanted her to, that this author wanted her to feel like a realistic teenage character. However, it creates this weird dynamic and disconnect between her and Ellie Thornfield. And it felt weird. It felt kind of icky. It took away from that brooding atmosphere that I was looking for. It was not the vibe. The other thing is, like, we have a team of psychics, right, that are drawn to this house, that are supposed to be helping. And it just feels like there's a very strange amount of communication barriers among psychics. Like, you know what I mean? You would think that they wouldn't fall into that because, like, they know stuff. I don't know. Honestly, there was just too many weaknesses without positives to really redeem it. So, I don't know. And everything was just so, all of these negatives were just so embedded into every single part of the story that it really detracted my enjoyment. I feel like the last, like, 80 pages I mainly just skimmed because at that point I was like, I kind of want a DNF, but I only have 80 pages to go. And I don't know. I just couldn't feel it. And that was the whole point for me. So, unfortunately, I gave this like a 1.5. So I think I rounded up to be generous on Goodreads because I did like the overall concept that she was trying to go with. I just didn't like literally anything about how it was executed. So I originally had Phantom Heart on my TBR, and this was Kelly Cree's retelling of Phantom of the Opera. I've actually not read the book. I've only seen like the movie musical. So maybe I would like that better since I wouldn't have the book to compare it to. But I honestly, well, no, I don't think so, because a lot of this had nothing to do with being disappointed by the retelling. Only a little bit of that was. So I think based off the fact that I only liked the first book of Nevermore, there's something about the way that this author writes that just doesn't connect with me. So I don't think I'm going to read more of her in the future. My next one that was pretty disappointing in the period, Old Country by Matt and Harrison Query. I was very disappointed in this. I don't know. Jordaline hyped it up. The last time I read a book that she really hyped up was Comfort Me with Apples, and I loved it. And the way that she described Old Country, I thought it was going to be really good. Basically, it's about this couple, and they move into the middle of nowhere. And their neighbors kind of warn them that there is a spirit entity that lives on the land, and it goes through cycles with the seasons. And so each season you can expect a different problem or a different type of like paranormal situation. And what you have to do is like, there's like a list of things that you have to do for each season to keep the entity away and away from harming you. And so I'm not gonna lie, like there was like the entity itself was a cool concept. This idea of like a cyclical haunting where every season you expect something specific, I thought was really unique and interesting. I'm basic for any haunted house story. So like this kind of unique spin on it and having it be like haunted land, I thought was interesting. And some of the stuff really was spooky. So there's like these scarecrows that will just appear during, I think, autumn. And, well, that would make the most sense. And like you have to basically grab one and burn it so it doesn't, you know, come back. But it's very uncanny because it seems kind of alive. And if you touch it, it will start screaming like a person, but it's not. Like, that's one example. But a lot of these are kind of really spooky. What went wrong? When I was reading about this online, when I was trying to figure out, okay, why don't I like this? A lot of people pointed to the idea that this used to be like a Reddit story. And so it really feels like they had the spooky parts down. Like they knew exactly what they wanted to do and they were really well developed. And then it feels like we just have fluff in between spooky episodes. I think that there was a very like, there's definitely an attempt to make us emotionally invested and create an emotional arc for our main characters. However, it just fell really flat. I felt like it just kind of came about at the last minute. The main characters spend a weird amount of time just oogling over each other and talking about, like, every freaking chapter. You have to read this whole section about how I love my wife and my land, or I love my husband and my land, and I love this life. And then, like, we go into a haunting thing. I don't think these people aren't Southern. I don't know why I did that, but whatever. Sorry about that. So that just got, like, really repetitive. Also, this book is dually narrated between the husband and the wife, and I don't think it needs to be like that until, like, maybe the last 20% of the book. So that kind of felt, like, useless. The dog was by far the best character, because I think the dog literally had more personality, and I'm not kidding. Like, the dog is actually a part of the story, and don't worry about it. I don't care if the dog doesn't die or anything like that. He's a good boy, and he is thriving by the end. So yeah, cool idea. Again, it's just the execution was a bit spotty. I gave this one a 2 out of 5. So the next one is a nonfiction book. Have I told you this already? Stories I Don't Want to Forget to Remember by Lauren Graham. And Lauren Graham, of course, is Lorelai Gilmore on Gilmore Girls. And so this is like a collection of essays that she wrote, primarily just kind of about her life. You get some good insights into what it was like early in her career, auditioning, hustling while trying to make it in Hollywood. You do get some memories from Gilmore Girls. It's definitely a good range. I ended up giving this a 3 because while I thought that in the moment when I was reading it, I remember being entertained. I laughed a little bit. I smiled a little bit. You know, there's something about it. It didn't personally stick with me very much. So I enjoyed it. I think that if you're a fan of Lauren Graham, try it. But overall, not really my favorite. I rounded this down to, I think, a 3 on Goodreads. I gave it like a 3.5. So it wasn't bad. The next one I'm going to talk about was originally like a 5-star that I think now is more of a 4 for me. To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. And this was not intentional, but the first time I read this book was 10 years ago. And 10 years is like the frame of time that we're working with into the Lighthouse. So Into the Lighthouse, Virginia Woolf uses a kind of her trademark stream of consciousness style. Like, you will spend so much time in one character's head, and then now all of a sudden you're in another character's head, and then you're in another character's head. So you're bouncing back and forth between characters and how they're experiencing a moment in time. And so it's split into 3 parts. The first part, you're experiencing one day with the Ramsey family, and they are at their, like, I guess, summer house near the coast. So they're on the coast. And so basically what's happening on this day is Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey's son, James, wants to go to the lighthouse. Dad is, like, kind of insensitive about the fact that, like, it's probably going to be rainy and stormy the next day. And he's just kind of like, yeah, no, not happening. And so you kind of see how Mrs. Ramsey is the more nurturing parent. You have Mr. Ramsey, who is not. Mrs. Ramsey is trying to, she's basically your typical Victorian woman. That's her. And so she's trying to care for her family in a changing world. Even though her husband is the breadwinner, Mrs. Ramsey's holding everybody together. And so then they also have some friends that are having dinner with them, including an artist named Lily Briscoe. I think she's the most compelling character of this book. So I read this book for the first time at my university, and I love the discussions around it. And so one of the things that we talked about is how Mrs. Ramsey is all about upholding these traditional Victorian values and getting married and having kids and following this pattern. And Lily Briscoe is the opposite. She doesn't get married. She's not interested in that. She's a painter. And it's just not, not in the end, but, like, because I don't want to spoil anything. But basically, part 2 is like this transition period where it kind of provides an overview. You get to see what is happening in this coastal home and how it kind of deteriorates with time, and you get to see how the family has changed over time. And then we follow these characters again in one day, 10 years later, and just about everything has changed. And so something that's really important to this book thematically is that a lot of what Mrs. Ramsey wanted for people, when she did get what she wanted, it just didn't work out that well. And it kind of shows how outdated some of those old school Victorian values were. And Lily was carving out her own path, and she was better for it. So, for a variety of reasons, this book really hit for me when I was in college. I think that the themes and, I don't know, just some of the lines just really spoke to me at that time. And Virginia Woolf's writing style is so beautiful, and I definitely don't deny that now. I feel like a lot of the messages and the pieces of writing, like literal sentences that I could still remember 10 years later, that's kind of like, when I went back to it, that's all that there was. There wasn't much that I'd like forgotten about that was substantial, probably because not much happens in this book. And I think that the messages in this book, I needed to hear them 10 years ago. And I don't need them as much now. So, yeah. I feel like there's a metaphor in this, much like how, their summer home kind of changed and aged over time, over 10 years. So have I in the 10 years since I've read this. So, I don't know. To me, this time it was more of a 4, but I'm not changing my rating on Goodreads from the original 5 just to kind of honor and respect my past self, because this book meant a ton to me when I first read it, and I did a really big paper on it that I really liked. Next one I want to talk about is The Marionettes by Katie Wismer. This is an indie published book. Katie Wismer has her YouTube channel, Kate's Book Date, and for the longest time I've watched her YouTube videos and her author vlogs, and I've always had a lot of respect for her on a lot of levels. I think that she's a really nice person. I think she's a really hard worker, and just the way that she talks about her work, I just can tell how much love she puts into it. And I don't know, I think for that reason I've been a little nervous, like, oof, but I really like her content. What if I read her books and I don't like it, and then it's awkward? But I really liked The Marionettes, so this one was a 4 for me. It's supposed to be like if you were one of those girlies where you liked vampire content as a teenager. This is like the grown-up version. And honestly, yeah, like I think that because that's what she was going for, and I think that she nailed it, the way that the story feels, I guess. So our main character is in like a college type setting. She's in the running to become what's called the Marionettes. She is a blood witch, and witches are generally going to be serving the vampires that are at the top of the hierarchical society. So at the tippity top of the hierarchy, you have vampires, and then you have witches, and then you have the humans at the very, very bottom. And the world building for this was actually like a lot cooler than I thought it was going to be. Imagine like the Underworld movies if it wasn't underground anymore. Like that's kind of what this feels like. The humans are living rough lives in this setting, okay? You follow your main character, Valerie Darkmoor, our blood witch, and she has to go through her final trials before she can officially be a marionette. In your last couple of weeks, you are paired up with a vampire, so you can basically be like, it's like an internship. Like, this isn't going to be the vampire that you're officially working for, but you are for these couple of weeks, right? And she actually gets matched up with the vampire prince. And so there is clearly something funky going on in that guy's circle. She kind of keeps getting thrown into without that much context. Meanwhile, she's having issues with her own magic. And so all of these threads kind of come together, and it's really exciting. And my understanding is eventually in the series, you get more of a romance. You get like, I don't know, you could start to see a little bit of the smoke. but there's no flame yet. So I thought that this was so fun. I liked Katie's writing style. I liked how much more in-depth the world was compared to what I expected. There were times where I felt like the foreshadowing could be a little bit heavy-handed, but then things still didn't go quite the way I thought that they were going to, so that was good. It's definitely a quick read. It's just under 300 pages. I believe that the other books in the series are a little bit larger. But I'm going to continue this. I thought it was pretty good. We do end on a mega cliffhanger. And one thing that makes me a little bit nervous when I get to the end is I know that Katie had such a hard time writing the ending. I think she's talking about how endings can be hard for her. So yeah, I'm curious to see where this is going. I was really pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this. But yeah, go support Kate. She's awesome. The next one I want to talk about was really anticipated for me, Semi-Well-Adjusted Despite Literally Everything by Allison Stoner. And if you don't know who Allison Stoner is, they were an actor as a child. They were in a lot of Disney content specifically, but also other kids programming. So they did Mike's Super Short Show on Disney Channel, if you remember that. They were in some episodes of Sweet Life and That's So Raven. Cheaper by the Dozen, Step Up. I love Step Up, by the way. The first one, not so much the other ones. Sorry, Allison. But anyway. Then they were really popular for Camp Rock. I was not really Camp Rock girly because I was at the age where I pretty much mostly transitioned out of Disney. Like, if I was going to watch something on Disney Channel, it's something I already knew and loved. I wasn't really into the new stuff. Because I was getting old. And so they have made some online content talking a bit about their experiences as a child star and some of the various things that went wrong. And the thing is, Allison was mostly these like secondary characters. She was like almost never the main character ever. And I always thought that was weird as a kid because I'd followed like her career a bit and I just thought that she was really good and pretty and talented and I just didn't get it. And I think it goes to show how out of touch Hollywood is because a lot of the denial of larger roles came from her appearance. Like basically, it sounds like casting directors thought that she looked like a secondary character. She had people advising her, well, your nose is big and crooked, so when paparazzi take your picture, this is how you need to tilt your head or you need to face this way because that's your good side. Obviously, there's a lot of issues with that. A lot of her earliest memories do come from working to be in this industry. Oops, I messed up. They use they, them pronouns. Anyway, sorry. So they end up talking about the stresses of being the breadwinner of trying to become the breadwinner for your family at such a young age and not being able to really consent to a lot of the decisions. They talk about that. They talk about the weird relationship with her dad, especially with their dad because of, the divorce between her parents. It was very messy and they were fed some information that we later find out wasn't necessarily accurate. Stepdad ends up being kind of a villain. And so these are all these different things while they're auditioning, struggling to compartmentalize literally anything in their life and deal with it properly. They talk about their experiences on some of the specific sets they were on, some of them positive, sadly some very negative. They talk about how because of Hollywood, their relationship to their body and to beauty standards were just a mess. And so eating disorders, turning to religion, being an extremely devout Christian, but then coming out as not straight, and the mental turmoil of that and trying to recover when no one's prioritizing your health in the industry. There's just so much to unpack, honestly. And it's just so devastating to think that almost nobody, if you think back to, especially from the millennial perspective, if I look back at all of like my childhood idols, the actresses and the singers that really made it for me, it's like none of them made it unscathed. Literally, it doesn't matter if you were the main character, if you were a secondary character all the time. Like, there's just so much stuff that has gone wrong with all of these people. And, in those moments in time when we're starting to see people unravel and have mental health crises and act in strange ways, I feel like the media is always so quick to blame them, but it's like, wait a second, that's a kid, or that's a young adult that has grown up in a camera lens. Like, it's really disturbing. I will say this memoir, one thing that makes it different, I would say it's one of the best written memoirs I've ever encountered, along with As I Knew When My Dad Rod Serling by his daughter Anne Serling. I would say this was really, really solid. I have heard, so Allison narrates the audiobook, and generally I think that she has that they have a very pleasant speaking voice. However, it sounds like in the early chapters, they kind of put on this, like, kid version voice of themselves. Like, they're trying to, because if they're talking about when they were really, really little, they kind of make their voice sound like that. I've heard that that's kind of unbearable. It would drive me nuts. This is why I don't read audiobooks or listen to audiobooks, because I get so picky about what people sound like. But, I don't know. Beware of that if you're an audiobook person. But overall, if you know who this person is and you want a little bit of insight into their life, there's, like, so much going on in this person's life. Like, this memoir is, like, I feel like it's jam-packed full of stuff. But this was really, really excellent. I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 on Goodreads. So our last one that we're going to talk about today, this is, like, the cream of the crop of the period. And I feel like everyone is going to be like, girly pop, what even is this? Just let me explain. Just give me a second. But The Silver Kiss by Annette Curtis Klaus. This is my third time reading this. So I read it for the first time when I was 12. Somebody honked. Anyway, I read it again when I was 14, and I haven't read it since then. I'm like 29. So I've lived half of my life since the last time I read this. But this was like an Insta fave when I was a kid. So this is like pre-Twilight. This book came out in, I believe, 1990. And what it's about, it's dually narrated, and which is wild to me. I kind of didn't remember that it was dually narrated. I usually cite Across the Universe by Beth Revis as being the book that really made me fall in love with dual narration. But I think that's actually the second one. The Silver Kiss was the first one. I use dual narration a lot in my own work. But anyway, it's dually narrated between Simon and Zoe. Zoe is a teenage girl, and she has a lot on her plate. Her best friend is about to move to a new state. Her mom is basically dying of cancer. And the people around her, the kids and the adults, just don't seem to know how to handle her as a result. So her father and her mother don't want her to see her mom being so sick, so she's not allowed to see her as often as she wants to. And her friends, they have their own issues too, and they don't always know how to talk to Zoe about something this difficult. So she's really struggling. She really needs somebody to talk to. She needs some freaking therapy for sure. And so then she encounters Simon. Simon's a 300-year-old vampire. So if you are one of those people where you get really, really upset when we have like a 300-year-old vampire and a teenage main character, then obviously skip this. Obviously, to me, I can separate this out just fine. This is not real life. This is a book, okay? Another thing I should add, if you don't like your vampires to be creepy and problematic, you also won't like this, because Simon, he's violent and he's weird. And so, again, my take is he's a vampire. It's supposed to be like this, but if you know that that's not your cup of tea, then I probably don't bother. But he's been around for like 300 years, and his arch nemesis is actually his brother, who was turned into a vampire as a very young child. So he's like this little kid vampire that's a menace to society. And so he's trying to kind of go after his brother Christopher. He and Zoe cross paths. Zoe's afraid of her mother dying, and she's having a hard time. And then we have Simon is grappling with the deaths of his family and just his kind of miserable existence on Earth. And so they kind of come together, and for the first time, they actually feel like they can confide in someone for the first time. So it's a paranormal romance. It's super, super short, and I don't care what anybody says. It is golden. It is so good. there's something about Annette Curtis Claus's writing where it is just like, it's so beautiful. Honestly, I think it is. And she has another book that's one of my favorites of all time, Blood and Chocolate. I've read that one like 4 times. And I would say the same thing about that one. Her writing is beautiful. And it's interesting because Lydia Foxglove at the Cozy Creative was recently, like when I was rereading this girl, like she puts out content exactly when I need it. It's so weird. But when I'm reading this book and I'm making these observations, she started talking about how, you know, if you read back, like reading back some of the books from her childhood, she also made those observations about the writing. And like how I feel like 30 years ago or so, people slowed down to smell the roses a little bit more. Not quite purple prose. Not always using first person and just allowing the narrator to kind of wallow in the story a little bit more and have these really beautiful descriptions that pop off the page. And, you know, when Lydia was talking about this, she was like, I think I want to edit my work a bit more to kind of create that feeling and create that quality in my writing. And I want to do the same after this reread of Silver Kiss. I love her writing. I love the thematic direction she takes her work. I love her characters. And one thing that just killed me this reread, because a lot has changed in, you know, the 15 years since I've read this. I read these descriptions of Zoe and how, like, there's like a line in her introduction, like the shadows look like bruises on her joints and things like that. It's just right off the bat, it is such a sad description of a character. And so much of this book, despite being a paranormal romance, which we look at as kind of fluffy, it's literally a really sad book. And I look back at teenage me and why teenage me loved it so much. And I think it just hit me how sad I was at that time. So, I don't know. Reading this book was wild. It was like, I got to look back at my past self and feel happy that, much like Alison Stoner, I've kind of come out semi-well-adjusted despite literally everything. So, but yeah, this one's a 5. It's always a 5. Annette Curtis Claus has literally written 4 books. Alien Secrets was not my favorite. I gave that one like a 3. I haven't read her like circusy book called Freaks. I should read it because I love her so much. Even though circuses are not really my thing and that's not really my setting for a book, I think that I should definitely try it because I love her so much. Like, I don't know what teenage me and young adult me would have done without this woman. So, thank you, Annette Curtis Claus, for sponsoring my life. Guys, that's a wrap. So that's what I've read lately-ish, past few months. Let me know in the comments what you guys have read, if you've read any of these before. I want to know your thoughts. I hope you're all having a great day. Bye.